The air in the EtherTech Solutions skyscraper was sterile, smelling faintly of ozone and expensive coffee. Below, the bustling heart of Munich seemed distant, an irrelevant world of ordinary lives. Inside the corner office, however, the temperature was rapidly dropping. Julian Thorne, 32, sat ramrod straight across a massive mahogany desk, his knuckles white. He was impeccably dressed, a tailored charcoal suit, a tie the color of a stormy sea, but his eyes held a desperate, controlled intensity. Across from him sat Elias Vance, the CEO of EtherTech, a man whose face seemed permanently sculpted into an expression of cool, calculated superiority. Beside Vance, acting as a human wall, was Serafina Voss, the head of acquisitions, a woman whose power was matched only by her icy demeanor. "Mr. Thorne," Vance began, his voice a low, smooth baritone that somehow managed to sound both polite and utterly dismissive. "We've reviewed your proposal for the Nexus project thoroughly. Your technical competency is adequate." Julian felt a flicker of hope, which he immediately suppressed. "Thank you, sir. I believe the Nexus framework offers a 40% efficiency boost in cross-platform data migration, which is critical for EtherTech's proposed expansion into Eastern European markets." Serafina Voss leaned forward, her silver ring catching the office light. "Critical, Mr. Thorne? Or merely obvious?" She didn't wait for him to answer. "Your background, while impressive on paper, a degree from ETH Zurich, a stint at a promising but ultimately failed startup, lacks the essential ingredient we look for at EtherTech, humility." Julian stiffened. "I'm not sure I follow. I've spent the last 6 months perfecting this strategy, working 18-hour days. My pitch is data-driven and financially sound." Vance gave a sigh that sounded rehearsed. "It's not about the data, Julian. It's about fit. You lack the required, corporate DNA. You challenge the established structure too readily. Frankly, you're an operational risk." He picked up a slim file, Julian's application, and slid it to the edge of the desk with a single, slow push. "Your interview is terminated. EtherTech Solutions will not be extending you an offer of employment. We wish you luck in finding a role where your overzealous approach is better appreciated." The rejection hit Julian like a physical blow. It wasn't just the words, it was the cold, casual cruelty of Vance's delivery. He wasn't just being turned down for a job, he was being judged, labeled, and discarded. Julian rose slowly, his composure an armor that barely held. He looked directly at Elias Vance. "Mr. Vance," Julian said, his voice barely a whisper, yet sharp as broken glass. "You call my approach overzealous. I call it commitment. You see operational risk. I see vision. You are making a profound mistake today, one that will cost this company more than just 40% efficiency." He paused at the office door, his hand on the cold steel handle. "I will not wish you luck, Mr. Vance. Instead, I promise you this: 1 year from today, the next time our paths cross, you will be reporting to me. You will work for me, or you will not work at all." The door closed behind him with a quiet, decisive click, leaving Vance and Voss in stunned silence. They exchanged a brief, patronizing laugh, dismissing his threat as the angry bluster of a rejected applicant, but as Julian Thorne stepped out of EtherTech, he didn't head for the exit. He walked straight to the panoramic window overlooking the city, his eyes blazing. The clock had started ticking. Only a week had passed since that humiliating meeting in Munich when Julian Thorne moved to London. He didn't come from a wealthy family, but he had 2 valuable assets: a modest savings built from his brilliant years at ETH Zurich, and the foundation of a powerful idea based on the Nexus project, the very concept Elias Vance had dismissed at EtherTech. In London's Canary Wharf district, where the wind howled between the steel and glass towers, Julian began working alone in a small, windowless office floor. He gave his company a simple, yet ambitious name, Ascendant Capital. Julian's financial vision was clear: grow his capital by making ultra-fast, data-driven investments into high-potential technology companies, businesses that were overlooked by competitors or intentionally underestimated. The algorithm of Fury. Julian's true power came from the same technology he had once engineered for EtherTech. Nexus Core. This proprietary algorithm was capable of processing market data 100 times faster than conventional systems, instantly detecting patterns and anomalies. While investors spent months analyzing stocks, Julian's algorithm made buy and sell decisions within seconds. The first 3 months were pure hell. Julian slept in a sleeping bag, dedicating every waking moment to optimizing his code and investing his limited capital in high-risk, high-return short positions. He suffered small losses at first, but the Nexus Core's adaptive learning capabilities were astounding. Julian rapidly adopted the profit-driven mindset of banking. But money was never his motivation. His only drive was Elias Vance, and the arrogant, dismissive look in Vance's eyes. The first major victory. Ascendant Capital's turning point came with a Paris-based cybersecurity startup, SentinelX. The market believed SentinelX was doomed, the stock had collapsed, and traditional analyses pointed to an unbearable debt burden. But the Nexus Core detected something no one else did: a confidential patent portfolio tied to a classified international government contract, a portfolio that was rapidly increasing in hidden value. This information had not yet entered the open markets. It was buried deep within legal filings on the dark corners of the web. Julian invested everything, his entire capital, and a small loan from an investor. He bought nearly every share of SentinelX he could find. 4 weeks later, the patent information leaked. A major U.S. tech giant announced it had acquired SentinelX at an astronomical valuation. Result: Ascendant Capital multiplied its capital by 20. Julian Thorne was no longer merely an ambitious engineer. He was now the enigmatic rising force of London's financial elite. He was no longer in a small office. He now leased luxurious floors of a former bank and had hired several top-tier analysts to join his team. The stalking of the prey. 11 months after Munich, Julian had EtherTech Solutions, Elias Vance's empire, locked in his sights. After Julian's departure, Vance had launched EtherTech's expansion into Eastern Europe. But as Julian had predicted, without the Nexus project, logistical inefficiencies surged and costs escalated. Vance tried to keep these cracks hidden from the public. Julian began using Ascendant Capital's full power to systematically dissect EtherTech's weaknesses. His algorithm detected large, seemingly random sell orders dragging the stock price down. This was a telltale sign: someone was weakening the company from the inside. Chloe Davies, a 24-year-old talented financial analyst from Dublin and Julian's first hire, tracked the origin of those transactions through a chain of shell corporations. Julian, Chloe said one late Friday evening, pointing at the tangled flowchart on the screen. These shell companies all converge into a single offshore fund in Austria. And the fund's owner is a very familiar name. Julian sipped his coffee and looked at the screen. A cold smile spread across his face. Owner of the fund, Serafina Voss, head of procurement, EtherTech. Voss, who appeared fiercely loyal to Vance, had been quietly bleeding the company from within. Greed had become the most unexpected ally of Julian's revenge. Julian leaned back in his chair. Chloe, Elias Vance tested her loyalty with money. And now, we're going to expose that betrayal, using our own. Prepare yourself. The first phase of revenge is complete. Now, the takeover begins. Time elapsed, 11 months since the Munich meeting. Julian Thorne had reached a critical turning point in his journey of vengeance. Nearly a year had passed since the meeting in Munich, and Ascendant Capital had evolved into a powerful financial force. To reach Serafina Voss, Julian arranged a neutral ground meeting in Zurich. In a lavish private club overlooking the lake, Julian and Serafina sat face to face. Without Elias Vance's knowledge, Serafina Voss was, as always, immaculate and composed. "I know why you called me here, Mr. Thorne. You're interested in Elias's company. But you should know, EtherTech is not for sale." Julian smiled. That was Elias's signature line: "Stop lying, Serafina. What I see on your face isn't just cold confidence. It's fear. My algorithm doesn't lie. I have every offshore fund and shell company you've used to drive down EtherTech's stock price for the past 6 months. I could prosecute you for breach of fiduciary duty and insider trading, resulting in a lifetime sentence. For the first time, her mask cracked. Anger and fear flickered across her face. "You're bluffing." "Bluff?" Julian slid two transparent folders across the table. One contained a detailed breakdown of her offshore transactions. The other, Ascendant Capital's official acquisition offer for EtherTech. Elias was too arrogant to notice you were artificially deflating the company. "But I did. So here's my proposal: if we work together, we can acquire EtherTech at 50% above its market value." Serafina looked at the offer in shock. The price was so high, Elias wouldn't be able to refuse. And it was far beyond the small profit she had initially schemed for. Julian continued, calmly but ruthlessly. "You will present this offer to the board and support me. In return, you receive 20% of the initial share sale proceeds, and more importantly, I guarantee the destruction of every piece of evidence in that folder. Two choices, Serafina: betray Vance and become wealthy, or oppose me and go to prison." Serafina exhaled shakily. Greed, at last, overtook fear. "Agreed. But when this offer reaches Vance, not even a hint of my involvement must be visible." "Don't worry," Julian said, savoring the cold taste of victory. "In your next meeting, you'll appear to be his most loyal defender." Vance's final stronghold with Serafina's inside leverage, Ascendant Capital's historic acquisition offer reached the EtherTech board with astonishing speed. The offer was so generous that even the board members couldn't understand why Elias Vance was resisting. Vance's face turned crimson with rage as he slammed his fist onto the long boardroom table. "This is a hostile takeover. This company is not for sale. That pathetic interview reject will not get a single drop of this company." Julian, appearing on the screen via the virtual meeting link, remained composed. "Mr. Vance, your emotional attachment conflicts with the financial interests of your shareholders. Please state your counterargument." Vance took a deep breath, eyes gleaming with premature triumph. "Very well. In 1 week, your entire offer will be meaningless. Because EtherTech Solutions is at the signing stage of a classified 4-year, €300 million contract with the Scandinavian Defence Alliance, NDA, this agreement was negotiated confidentially, only myself and my attorney know the terms. Once it is executed, the company's value will double your offer." A murmur rippled through the room. This was Vance's final trump card, the miracle that would save the company from the man attempting to take it from him. Back in London, Julian leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed calmly on his screen. This contract was Vance's last and most precious secret. "Show me the contract, Mr. Vance," Julian said. "Prove its existence and validity, and I will withdraw my offer." Vance laughed, smug and dismissive. "Never. That information is restricted. You don't have clearance. Unless, you were CEO of EtherTech." But the look on Julian's face was not disappointment. Nor defeat. It was the look of a hunter who had already cornered his prey. "You're mistaken, Mr. Vance," Julian said, his voice cold, steady, and echoing across the boardroom. "You not being CEO restricts access to that information, but it doesn't restrict me that I already have it." Time elapsed, exactly 12 months since Munich. Tomorrow, the acquisition vote would take place. The Nexus Core's final strike. The EtherTech Solutions board gathered in the same corner office in Munich, Elias Vance's fortress of authority. Julian Thorne joined remotely from London, his face steady and confident on the large digital display mounted on the wall. Just before the vote began, Elias Vance stood up. His expression was the same arrogant smirk he wore when Julian had walked out of this very building a year ago. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vance began. "Ascendant Capital's offer may appear generous, but it is short-sighted. The Scandinavian Defence Alliance, NDA, contract I mentioned yesterday will turn EtherTech into a financial titan overnight. Mr. Thorne claims to have access to this information, but that's impossible. It is exclusively under my control." Julian smiled, not in arrogance, but in certainty. "You're mistaken, Mr. Vance. What you call confidential information is, in the eyes of my algorithm, nothing more than a particularly interesting data fragment." Julian remotely activated his system. The main screen in the boardroom lit up with a controlled torrent of moving data points. encrypted transmissions, legal metadata, server traffic logs, and packet frequency patterns, displayed as a pulsing map of digital pathways. I did not steal the contract, Julian said calmly. Nexus Corps simply watched the movement of encrypted traffic between NDA's official servers and your attorney's office in Zurich. The frequency, packet size, and timing confirm the existence of a €300 million defense contract. That is a legal intrusion. Vance shouted in panic. Legal, Julian replied, without raising an eyebrow. All derived from publicly observable traffic, judicial mobility records, and encryption pattern statistics. That's the power of my technology. A final document appeared on screen. NDA defense contract, clause 4.3, validity conditions. Julian looked directly at Vance, predatory, poised. You're right about one thing. Once executed, the contract will double EtherTech's valuation. But clause 4.3 requires that the original engineering team behind the classified security protocol remain employed at EtherTech. Silence. Absolute silence. And here's the problem, Mr. Vance, Julian continued, voice now sharp, cold. The original protocol, the one that powers the NDA's encryption framework, was written by me. Over 6 months, based on Nexus Technology. So, when you dismissed me after that foolish job interview, you didn't just reject me, you voided the very foundation of the NDA contract. The triumphant return. Vance's face went pale. This wasn't just a business failure, it was a personal catastrophe. The only thing that could have saved EtherTech was the man he had thrown out of the building. In the midst of chaos, Serafina Voss delivered her line, flawlessly. This is no longer a philosophical debate, she said. This is risk management. If we reject Ascendant Capital's offer, the NDA contract collapses, and so does our company. The acquisition is the only logical solution. The vote was swift. Pre-coordinated members aligned with Voss and Julian, unanimous. Ascendant Capital's acquisition was approved. The meeting ended. Elias Vance remained at the head of the table, but the throne was no longer his. Julian's voice echoed through the room one last time. Serafina, please direct Mr. Vance to my office once he arrives. There are things he and I need to discuss. And Serafina, she looked up. Congratulations. You are now a dismissed officer of EtherTech. Your compensation will be handled by counsel. Effective immediately, your role here is terminated. Julian had used her piece in the game, and now removed her from the board. The fulfillment of the vow. A few hours later, Julian walked back into the EtherTech tower in Munich. The cold, glass-lined executive floor, once symbol of his rejection, felt different now, because this time, he was sitting in the CEO's chair. Elias Vance stood at the doorway, suit wrinkled, expression hollow. The arrogant king had been reduced to a dethroned relic. You called for me, Thorne, he said, voice unsteady. Julian leaned back, calm, composed. Exactly 1 year ago, in this same office, I made you a promise, Julian said quietly. 1 year from now, when our paths cross again, you will either be working for me or not working at all. Vance said nothing. His silence was an admission. Julian took a familiar file from his desk, the one Vance had once handed him after rejecting him. I reviewed your employment application, Mr. Vance, Julian said, returning the file the same way it had once been given to him. You have experience, I'll give you that, but your arrogance, your lack of vision, is not compatible with our corporate DNA. Julian stood up. The city of Munich stretched beneath him, cold, precise, conquered. So as the new CEO of EtherTech and the owner of Ascendant Capital, I have only one final assignment for you, Mr. Vance, effective immediately. You are leaving this company. I sincerely wish you luck. Perhaps somewhere, your overeager leadership style will be appreciated. Vance looked at Julian. It wasn't hate in his eyes, it was recognition, because Julian had not just taken his company. He had proven his prophecy. Julian turned toward the window, overlooking the city that had once rejected him. This was not merely revenge. It was the victory of vision over arrogance.